Maybe the most important thing in terms of achieving quality mental health status in our lives and protecting that mental health is the ability to establish boundaries. Now, a lot of people think boundaries are like mean or you're being difficult. And trust me, when you establish boundaries with some people, you are going to be called mean and you are going to be called difficult. But it is the greatest gift that you can give to yourself, because some people do not deserve access to you because they do not treat you with the kind of respect and the kind of, warmth and kindness that you deserve. And when that happens, that destroys your mental health. It erodes your quality of life. And you've got to be able to develop the ability to say, this person there, even if I love you, you no longer get access to me because you take away from the person I want to be. You take away from the kind of human I want to be. You take away from the life I want to achieve. You take away from what I'm working on and what I'm building. You cause me hurts and harms. And when you can be able to do that, your life will most definitely improve. So that's what we're going to talk about this week, starting today. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie. I'm somebody who used to be super close to me. I met this person out in the world speaking, and we just kind of hit it off. She was cool. But shortly after that, I realized that there was some jealousy present. I realized that there was something about me that seemed to trigger her. And I kept telling her, I refuse to have somebody in my life for whom me just being and just living my life triggers them. And the closer we got, the more I realized, like, me growing in my field and publishing books and getting invited to speak at certain events was a massive trigger to her. And then even more craziness happened. My business took off. I started getting invited to Hollywood events and signed a couple of TV deals, and things were like really progressing. And that person's behavior just got worse and worse. And I would say to them, this does not feel good. And if it continues along this path, I'm going to change your ability to have access to me. I'm going to have to change the nature of this relationship. I don't know if she didn't believe me, or I don't know what she inherently thought, but it got to the point where I literally said, okay, this is goodbye. And I blocked her on my phone so she could not reach me anymore. Because I didn't like the way I was being treated. I didn't like the way I was being talked to. And I didn't like the way it made me feel. It literally would depress me. It would literally make me feel bad. And it would take away from the joy I was trying to experience in my life. Now, when I share that, some people say, Elliot, that was cold. You were being mean. You were being difficult. But the truth is, I was being kind to me. I had a lot of negative experiences with this person. And those negative experiences are gone. I don't experience that hurt. I don't experience under attack. I don't experience that jealousy and that envy and the way it was impacting my life. Like I don't experience that now. And it's because I removed her access to me because she did not handle it well. She did not deserve it. She wasn't a bad person. Still isn't a bad person. She wasn't a mean person, but she had issues that were causing her to experience what I was going through as a trigger to her, and she was giving her some regrets and making her wish she had made different choices and started like feeling competitive with me. I don't think that person's a bad person one bit. I've never said a mean or bad word to or about that person. But that's the point of boundaries, is like you get to decide who has access to you. You get to decide how long they have access to you. You get to decide whether or not you're going to continue that access. Like you literally get to choose. Here are the people I want around me and why. I think a lot of people, like, you don't make that choice and we allow people around us and we don't even realize that it's costing us. It's actually causing us harm and taking away from our mental health. But let this be your reminder that you don't have to do that. So if there's somebody in your life that is taken away from your mental health, I think you should be able to say, I need you to change in these ways. I need you to change in these ways. I need you to change in these ways. And if they continue to not change, then you get to remove them from your life because they don't deserve access to you. And that's not mean. It's not cold-hearted. It's not you being difficult. It's you being really kind to you. Your mental health is directly related to your ability to set and implement boundaries. And I'm going to tell you the clue that lets you know you need to be better at setting boundaries. And boundaries are actually a very simple thing, but what makes it so hard and challenging often surprises people. Like, setting the boundary is not the hard part. We do it all the time. And you know, when you're talking to someone and you say, "Don't talk to me like that," or you say, "Don't call me after a certain hour, before a certain hour." Like, we do it all the time. Like, setting a boundary is easy. But here's the tricky part. You might tell somebody, "Don't call me before a certain hour." Like, I have an aunt, and I've told her many times, I am not a morning person. I am not a morning person. I am not a morning person. So I do not want to be called before 10 a.m. That is my boundary. And I realized that the setting that boundary is not difficult. I can easily tell her that. Don't call me before 10 a.m. But what happens if I'm awake and I'm doing stuff and she called before 10 a.m. and I answer? I just failed to implement my boundary. And then the only thing that I am left to do is to get frustrated and upset and continue to repeat myself, and it turns into a bigger problem. So that's what makes implementing boundaries so challenging. I'm going to tell you today the number one sign that you need boundaries and to help you stay really consistent in implementing those boundaries. So here's the biggest sign that you need to implement boundaries, and you have to enforce them. And the biggest sign is your mood and your energy level. So I guess I should say the biggest signs, plural, your mood and your energy level. So all of us have heard about the terms introvert and extrovert, but we often misunderstand them. We think an extrovert is a people person and an introvert is antisocial. That's how we think about it, but that's actually not true. What is actually true is an introvert is someone who recharges their battery, meaning they gain more energy from time in isolation or isolated activities, reading, putting puzzles together, that sort of thing, like doing something alone. An extrovert is someone who recharges their battery or gains energy from being around people, going to parties, social events, happy hour, that sort of stuff. That is the difference. So what happens when you don't have clear boundaries, and that is a really important distinction that everyone needs to know, because when you don't have clear boundaries, you end up much more exhausted than you should be. Because what happens, I want to stay home, I'm tired, I've had a long day, a long week, a long whatever. Somebody calls me and says, "Hey, let's go hang out tonight." And I know I'm not in the mood, but here's where the boundary becomes a problem. I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. I don't want to not show up. I don't want to not go. And then you do something that you otherwise know isn't good for you and that you shouldn't have done. And now your energy decreases, right? So a big sign for you that you need to implement stronger boundaries is just paying attention to your energy level. If you are spending more time exhausted than you should be, then that's a sign I'm doing more things than I should be doing. And I need to go out more and socialize because I'm spending too much time alone if I'm an extrovert, or I'm spending too much time out and I need to spend more time alone if I'm an introvert. I am someone like that. When I go to events, people want to be around me and take pictures and invite me here, there, and everywhere. And every now and then I have this phrase that I say to my team. I say I'm over people. And that's how they know I'm probably going to go in my hotel room. I'm going to stay in my hotel room the rest of the night and watch movies and work on my computer. And that's good for me. Those are boundaries. And the other thing is paying attention to your mood. Like the example I gave with my aunt. She will call me when she wants to, knowing I do not want to be talked to before 10 a.m. And the more she did it and violated the boundary, the more frustrated I became. And my mood suffers as a result of being so frustrated. Like, it makes me, angry is too strong a word, but it just makes me irritated. And that's how I know, I need to implement that boundary. And interestingly, it got significantly better when I decided I'm just not going to answer the phone. I'm not going to reinforce the behavior. Because whether I like it or not, every time I answer the phone at 8:30 a.m., I'm reinforcing the behavior because she got her question answered or she got to do what she wanted to do without respecting me. And I forced it over the years by just not responding to the phone call that she made at 7:30 a.m., 8:30. I mean, sometimes she called me crazy hours. And I decided not to respond to it. And what happened? My mood got better because I didn't have the frustration of feeling like I was being disrespected, of feeling like you're not listening to me, you're not hearing me, so on and so on. So pay attention to your energy level and your mood. That will tell you whether or not you have an issue with boundaries and tell you whether or not you need to implement stronger boundaries. You know, we often think about boundaries like boundaries we set with other people, but we also need to set clear boundaries in our lives with other things. Like when you hear boundaries, I don't want you just thinking about other people who violate your boundaries, people who mistreat you, people who are around you when they shouldn't be, so on and so on. I want you to think about your time and how you treat yourself, right? And I'll give you an example. Here's the time I set a boundary. Didn't realize I was setting a boundary, but I set a boundary and it helped me tremendously. I grew up very much enjoying video games. And when I was in college, the PlayStation 2 came out, just to let you know how old I am. The PlayStation 2 came out, and that was a big, massive deal. There was a massive difference between the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2. Like a big, huge, massive, like seismic shift in what these two things could do. And I wanted a PlayStation 2 so badly. Everybody wanted one. A buddy of mine worked at Walmart where they sold them, and he told me, I'll keep one like behind the counter for you so you can come buy it when you're ready. I'm like, yes, ready. Here we go. I'm on it. And I decided not to buy it because I knew if I had that PlayStation in my dorm room, I wouldn't spend the kind of time focused on schoolwork and I would be distracted by video games. And I didn't want that. So that's an example. And today I'm going to talk to you about other examples on how boundaries need to be enforced, not just with people, but with things and with behaviors and with other things that will really, really help your life. So here's an example of something that was in my life without boundaries, something that was in my life and had no boundaries to it. And it was the way I was drinking soda and eating food. And it had a massive negative impact on my life. Like I'm ashamed and embarrassed to admit it now, but like I just wasn't thinking about it. And I was so stressed and so busy and going from city to city, airport to airport, and it just wasn't sustainable. And I was eating fast food literally daily, and I was drinking 4 or 5 sodas a day. If I felt sluggish, I would drink more soda because it had caffeine and sugar, but didn't realize it came with a crash, and I just ended up doing it again. This massive cycle. But I needed to have boundaries. We talk about it as discipline a lot, but really what it is boundaries. And I needed to give myself boundaries around the food I was consuming. And I changed everything. I haven't had a soda now in almost a year. I drink a smoothie with all kinds of powders and superfoods and all kinds of stuff in it every single day. And I feel better. I look better. I exercise every day. And it has completely transformed my life. And that is 100% about boundaries. It is 100% about me saying, I have boundaries around the things I consume. I have boundaries around the things that I decide to put in my body. I have boundaries around the things that I decide will go into my body and how I treat my body in terms of rest and exercise. And I don't let people violate those boundaries. Like there are lots of times when I go out and people try to get me to eat certain things that I don't want to eat. Oh, you can have that burger. And I'm like, no, I choose not to. Oh, you can just have it one time. I don't know why people do that, but they do that. And me having boundaries is to say, nope, not tonight. I'm not going to have a burger. I'm going to have a protein, lots of vegetables, and that's how I'm going to choose to enjoy my meal. That is boundaries. That is what we need to do and how we need to treat ourselves. And I needed to learn that lesson because for a long time, I treated food and soda and stuff like that without boundaries, and my health suffered as a consequence of it. Another area where boundaries become an issue is social media. People will often scroll and scroll and scroll, and they don't implement boundaries. And here's another thing, like people will often say to me, like social media stresses me out, which I get. It has, in my life, stressed me out too. I get that. But what if everybody took control of A, their time, like not spending so much time on social media, and B, who you follow? What if you spend a lot of time and you follow only the kinds of people that add to your life? Don't follow the people that are triggers to you. Don't follow the news outlets that are triggers to you. Don't follow the kinds of accounts that say things that you experience as troubling. That is a massive implementation of boundaries and will allow you to be your very best self simply by making those really simple choices. But remember, the boundary is simple. The enforcement of the boundary is much more challenging, and that's what we need to master. That's what we need to focus on, and that's what I hope this episode encourages you to do. Pick a boundary. Doesn't have to be around people. For me, it's around foods. For me, it's around social media. I literally went down my social media account and who I followed and who I didn't, and I only stayed connected to the kinds of accounts that inspire me. I purposely don't follow the ones that frustrate me. There you go. Boundaries are an incredibly important part of your mental health. I've been saying that all week. There are literally psychotherapists that do almost nothing but teach people how to enforce boundaries. Like, that's how critical your boundaries are. That's the difference that having rigid boundaries will make in your life and will contribute to your mental health. Like, it is a huge thing. And earlier today, I was working with a client that is having an issue with their boundaries and getting people in their family to respect their boundaries and the impact it is having on them. And I'm going to talk about that today. Now, I'm going to change some of the details. Obviously, I have to protect people's privacy. I'm not going to say any names, and I'm going to change some of the details. But the lesson and the point will be very, very critical, will be clear, will be important. And I want all the listeners to learn from it. So now, I'm not the type of psychotherapist that thinks it's my job to teach people things. I think it's my job to help people heal through their journey. And the differences in their behaviors and lived experience will come through that healing. That's how I view my work. And this person was really, really struggling with the way their family was responding to their boundaries and wanting to enforce them. So the person I was working with is a woman. She's roughly in her, let's say, mid-40s. And she has a sibling, a brother. And her and this brother kind of historically haven't gotten along. The brother has been selfish. The brother has taken advantage of her over the years, and the brother is very jealous of her. And then compound that, her dad also does not prioritize her. And over the years, she's had super duper hurt feelings. So this is a really kind woman who's very affectionate to her family, very caring, very nurturing, very giving. And over the years, this brother and this dad have taken advantage of her kindness. Can you help me move and can you do all these things? But whenever she asks for something, it doesn't ever happen. They actually get mad at her when she has the audacity to ask for things. So in the session today, we were talking about do I have the right to be angry? And I was like, well, yes and no. When people take advantage of you and when people don't prioritize you and people cause you hurts, it is a very reasonable response for you to be angry. That is normal. In fact, I would argue that is healthy. I would argue that's actually a good thing. When I feel annoyed and angry, to respond in congruence to that anger. That's a good, healthy response. Genuinely believe that. But here's where I say yes and no. And here's where I say no. Did you give them a boundary that they have failed to enforce? Have you said to them, if you don't make me feel prioritized, loved, if you don't make me feel like this relationship is reciprocal, here's what I will do? And the answer was no. So you have to first give people a boundary before you can get upset with them, before you can be disappointed. You haven't made a request. And here's what we do. And so many of us do this. I would even argue all of us do this. We think that our mood or our attitude will lead towards behavior change, and it doesn't. So, for example, if I put myself in the shoes of this woman, if I feel like my sibling and dad are mistreating me, if I stay participatory in the mistreatment, but I have a bad mood or I sigh, if you ask me to come help you move and I'm like, but then I do it, my mood is not going to motivate anyone to change their behavior. People are not motivated to change behavior simply because you have a bad mood or because you're not responding to something. They're going to continue to do the same behavior because they got the reward. You helped them move or did the other thing, right? Whatever it might have been. It is critical. It is crucial. It is super important that you understand In order for me to have someone change, I have to do two really important things. Number one, I have to ask them to change, right? That's the first step of implementing a boundary. You have to say, here is the changes I want to see, or here are the changes I want to see. The second thing is I have to let them know the consequences of changing or not changing. If you do make the changes I'm requesting, here's how you will notice me responding. And if you don't make the changes that I'm requesting, here's how you will notice me responding. Both of these things are crucially and critically important. Both of them are crucial and incredible steps in the journey, and everyone needs to learn that this is how you enforce a boundary. I don't think I'm unique in this, but I've had my boundaries tested plenty of times. I think the moment you put up a boundary, you only know that it's there because someone tests it. In fact, that's like the first response is when you tell someone, like, here's a boundary, here's a thing I expect. The very first thing that you should expect is they're going to test that boundary to see if you mean it, to see if you're actually going to follow through. Parents know this. Like when you tell your children, if you don't do your homework, here's the punishment you're going to get. The first thing children do is they want to test. Well, let's see. Does my mom or dad mean that thing that they just said? And I've had people cross boundaries in a way that made me not engage with that person anymore. I'm gonna share a story here later. And I've had people that were so close to me, I wasn't willing to cut them off, but it changed the nature at which I was willing to expose myself to them because the boundary crossings were really unhealthy and put me in unhealthy spaces and positions. But either way, be prepared for your boundaries to be tested. That's the whole point. If your boundary is not tested, it's not really a boundary, and that's just human nature. Like, that is just, quite frankly, what happens when we start implementing boundaries. In my career, I've dealt with a lot of professional envy and jealousy and things that I experience as quite harmful, to be very honest with you. And one of the first instances of this was when I graduated with my graduate degree. There was a student who was a few years after me and was copying me. I will say it that way. And it made me super uncomfortable because it was obvious to me that this person was very interested in fame, notoriety, and attention, and not necessarily interested in like making a difference in the way that I was. And not to say I was better or worse than this person, but my desire and my ambition for being in this field comes from a very deep place and comes from my own pain and trauma. And it seemed to me that this person just wanted fame and attention, and it made me super uncomfortable. And the more that they kind of hovered around me, the more I got uncomfortable until I started finding out that they were like using my name to promote their events. Like, I was trained by Elliott Connie. I studied with Elliott Connie, and I didn't appreciate that. Number one, it wasn't necessarily true. And number two, like, I didn't like feeling used in that way. And I asked this person to stop. We were in each other's worlds quite a bit. They would reach out to me because they wanted access to the information I had, and they wanted me to talk about the things I was doing. But we also had a lot of mutual friends and colleagues, so I saw this person quite a bit. And then one day, I noticed that they were continuing to mention me in the promotion of their events after I had continuously said, please stop doing that. It is A, not accurate, and B, you're just using my name to build yourself up. And I realized the more that I talked to that person, I gave them the ability to continue to say, like, I recently talked to Elliott Connie, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, I have to cut you off now. I do not want to associate with you anymore. Please refrain from contacting me any further. I sent them an email that said all of that. I deleted them from my phone. I blocked them on social media. I wanted no association with this person again. And literally, and that was probably, it's 2025. That was probably somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, 12 years ago, if I had to guess. I have seen this person only one time since then. And, you know, my career has gone to where it's gone. And you know, they are working professional as well. Like, but I was really happy that there had been a line and the association has been split. Like, his ability to say he's associated with me in any way had been removed. And that's actually how I wanted it. again, I think when you give someone a boundary, depending on the nature of that relationship and the level of the boundary, like sometimes the consequence of an infraction is I'm just not willing to engage with you any further. Like I'm just not willing to play this game with you. And one of the ways you keep yourself healthy is by having the courage to remove people that are a threat to your boundaries, because anyone that's a threat to your boundaries is also a threat to your mental health. Thanks for being here. If you wouldn't mind doing me a super huge favor, I would love it if you would share this podcast with at least one person in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And also don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to your podcast. And also follow me on all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can search for my name, Elliott Connie, or at Elliott Speaks. That's my handle across all platforms. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.